Good afternoon, ChangeNOW. How are you all doing? My name's Keme and Nzerem. I'm delighted to introduce our next session, the power of trees and preserving forest biodiversity. I've always wanted to introduce something, an event called the power of trees, and I'm delighted that we've got some incredible people to talk us through what trees, what forests can do for our environment. So, we've got a panel in a moment. We've got an amazing fireside chat in about 40 minutes with an incredible athlete who's doing some really, really interesting work. But first up, to kick us off, our keynote. Now, this is a gentleman, he calls himself an ecopreneur. That's the term, I believe. And I'm really, really interested to hear what he's got to tell us, because he has been incredibly lauded for the work that he does, generating, preserving forest and forest lands, particularly in South America. He is the recipient of the Earthshot Prize, no less, in 2023 for the work he's done with Accion and Andina. Also, the other day, got an award from the United Nations for global forest preservation. It is my delight to welcome to the stage Florent Kaiser. Take it away.
Quick check. Can everybody hear me? Yes? Great. So I'll let you speak a bit, see the screens a little bit, because I brought some pictures and I hope you can feel the vibe a little bit. But let's dive right in. I'm taking you today to the Andes. The Andes are an incredible mountain range in South America, over 7,000 kilometers long, spanning 7 countries. There's many reasons why the Andes are so fascinating. I want to focus today on water. So the Andes provide water for the largest part of the South American continent. On the east of the Andes, we have the Amazon River Basin. On the west of the Andes, we have cities, communities, hosting millions of people that depend on the water from the Andes. Now, where does the water in the Andes come from? Well, first, glaciers. Glaciers hold a lot of the water of South America. Now, we all know there's a big problem. They are melting, and they are melting incredibly fast. By 2050, we expect 70% of the world's tropical glaciers to have melted away, causing serious risks to water security in the Andes and elsewhere in the world. The second source of water is high Andean forests and ecosystems. In particular, one tree species that I want to focus on, the incredible polylepis trees. Sometimes they call it the most amazing tree that you have never heard of. Well, here it is. The polylepis trees have a magic power. As you can see, moss accumulates on its branches, and that moss has the capacity to capture humidity out of the air. And that humidity actually over time accumulates in that moss. Those mosses fall onto the ground, and over time this builds incredibly thick sponge-like layers that store carbon, but essentially also water. Over time, not only does it feed into these same forests, but it creates actually wetlands and ecosystems. Now, there is a second big problem after the glacier melt. These forests have been decimated. There's only 1 to 10% left of these forests across the South American continent. Fortunately, there is extraordinary people in the Andes, and my dear friend and co-founder Constantino Auca here, who is an indigenous leader from the high Andes in Peru. Along his tremendous career, over 30 years of working with local communities, he understood 2 crucial things. 1, forests can be brought back through efforts and techniques that apply in the Andes and elsewhere, reforestation, forest protection, and many other things that actually work if we are really getting down to do them. Second, and by far more importantly, Tino had understood how to revive the ancestral traditions of his very own indigenous culture to unite large amounts of people to conduct that kind of work. Through Aini and Minka in local Quechua language, which means basically something close to reciprocity and communal service, the Inca were able, over 500-600 years ago, to actually harness a lot of people to build their empire. Fortresses, aqueducts, the famous Inca trails. Tino had understood how to revive that today, these ancestral principles that are still dormant in the communities, to actually bring the people together to bring back forests. When I met Tino in 2018, he invited me to come to one of what he calls the reforestation festival, the Keunia Raimin, which is the Keunia means polylepis, that tree that we saw before. Raimi means celebration. So he understood how to utilize Aini and Minka, those ancestral principles, to bring together a large amount of people to reforest. What I saw that day blew my mind. Over 1,000 people showed up, and we reforested over 100,000 native trees in one single day. Speak about scale, right? That was, for me, really a game-changing moment. And at the end of the day, I asked Tino, I approached Tino, you've done amazing work. You've done amazing work here in the Andes over the last 20 years. What is next for you? What do we do with this? And Tino replied, well, I want to take this from Cusco in Peru across the country, if not across the Andes. That was a very big motivation for us. I saw a lot of scale together with the other co-founders. We saw an opportunity to help Tino and other incredible leaders to really deliver on the kind of work that we are all collectively seeking. This was the birth of our project, Accion Andina. Accion Andina is becoming a movement, a community-led movement across the Andes that works together with communities by reviving ancestral principles to restore and protect forests, native forests. The main motivation for communities is water. In other words of the communities themselves, a lady just a couple of weeks ago said to us, well, water is life, water is economy, and water is the future of our children. Accion Andina started as a project. It started as a project, as a dream of Tino. It is now becoming a movement. The first starting point with Accion Andina is protecting the forests that are still intact, the native forests of the high Andes. We're roughly looking here at altitudes of 4,000, 4,500 meters in altitude. Very high mountain systems. There's roughly 500,000 hectares left of these incredible polylepis forests. They need to be protected. Accion Andina works with the communities to actually support them in their quest to protecting their lands. And so from creating protected areas that are owned entirely by and run by the communities to actually quite often helping through the protection of these lands gain the title to the very own land for the first time in their history. Which, by the way, as another benefit, quite often helps them to actually fight back on mining concession, extractive industries. In some of the areas, these mining concessions have been given out over the last 40 years in very corrupt measures. So incredibly important to the community's life. The second is restoration. Utilizing to what I said before, the Aini and Minka principle, the community, Accion Andina co-invests into nurseries that are entirely run and owned by the communities, that are collecting, the communities then go out, collect native seeds from the forest, nearby forest, are producing those native seeds into saplings over an 8 to 11 month time period, and at the same time it is creating jobs. It is creating jobs, mostly led by women, these activities in the nurseries, and really we're witnessing now 5 years into the project the tiny small birth of a local restoration economy, which is very powerful in the Andes, especially for the women at this altitude where economic alternatives are very sparse. Then communities, in the spirit of Aini and Minka, come together in these reforestation days that I mentioned before and plant up to 100,000 trees in one single day. So the other point I want to make here, yes, Aini and Minka allows you to bring a lot of people, allows you to bring a lot of trees, a lot of direct action. and it has clear direct ecological benefit. But there's another very important point here. The revival of these ancestral cultures, the revival of these core principles that the people in the Andes have, and frankly a lot of us have through our own cultures, is a fundamental aspect. The communities have endured the consequences of colonization for over 500 years. By this action, the revival of those principles, there is a certain co-benefit here that is incredibly valuable as an identity, as a collective identity across the Andes, across the entire continent. Accion Andina started as a project. I mentioned this before. We started in 2 countries in 2018. Accion Andina is now spreading over 5 countries already. It has become a movement. We started with a few hundred people involved. Today, just this year, we have over 30,000 people actively engaged in restoration activities during the season. And it is just the beginning. I wanted to touch quickly on my personal quest here. I am obviously not from the Andes, and to me it was a blessing to meet Tino and the many other leaders, to actually partner with him, to bring the marriage, let's say, of these ancestral principles with modern technologies and approaches to growing projects, to making things sustainable, and so on and so on. I was seeking a personal quest. Can we come together collectively, and given the urgency and the scale of the crisis we're all together in, I know we all feel that somehow, can we come together and respond at the continental scale level to these threats by doing collective action at the continental scale? Accion Andina has become just that. It is a powerful vehicle that drives change across an entire region. Now, let's not be fooled. It is a gigantic task to restore the Andes. We're speaking of 7 countries, thousands of kilometers. Today we have roughly 140 communities involved. We will need thousands of communities to conduct that work if we want to have a chance to really make a difference, especially on water security. However, it's pointing in the right direction. After just 5 years, there are positive signs. The communities themselves are spreading the opportunity. It is not us going around and trying to convince communities to join the Accion Andina. It is actually self-spreading. Community A sees, okay, they're bringing back the forest, we want to be part of that as well. It is becoming a movement, and there is incredible power in that. On the other hand, I cannot say this loud enough every time. Accion Andina is not a tree planting, it's not just a tree planting program in the Andes. One, it is a holistic effort to bring back and protect native forests across an entire continent, with clear ecological, social, and cultural benefits. But second, and this is really where I want to touch on a very important point. Second, for me personally, and I think for thousands of people in the Andes, that project is becoming a symbol of hope. It is becoming a guiding light for the type of collection efforts and collective action that we need to do in the Andes and all across the world. In the Andes, united, by the power of one single tree, bringing together really thousands of people is very powerful. And I actually just flew back here, and my sister, my wife, were participated in this, that are here today in this planting, in the planting days. And it is a very powerful act. I want to end with asking myself, what is the power of trees? And as I look at the work that we've done over the last 5 years, I came to the conclusion that the power of tree, the true power of tree, besides all the wonderful benefits, again, ecologic, economical, and many more that the trees directly bring, is actually what you see in them, what they evoke in our own very heart. And for me, in Accion Andina, the power of trees has a lot to do with strength, with passion, with humility, with endurance, with longevity, with collaboration, and with unity. That is something that you feel every time you look at a tree, or even better, plant a tree. The more I conduct this work, and the more, and we're connected to all sorts of efforts to support it, there is a feeling that is coming out around that a lot of the solutions actually to scaling up the work that we do lie in simplicity. And it comes somehow through that we tend quite often to overcomplicate things. We have created a world that is obviously very complex, but at times our solutions, our response are also incredibly complex. And a lot of times these solutions need to be around simplicity. I find the crisis that we are in cannot be resolved with technocratic approaches. Technology, money, and all of these things, they play a role, an incredibly important role. And all of us here driving these types of solutions, we're in the middle of it. But first and foremost, the crisis we're in is a value crisis. It's a crisis of value, it's a crisis of purpose. And we can learn a lot from the people in the Andes and a lot from the trees on how to overcome this. So I bring that question back to you as a final point. What do you see as the power of tree? Thank you.
Oh, I don't need the clicker. It's just my voice. Florent, thank you very much indeed. That was so fascinating, man.
Thank you.
It's so wonderful to be able to go on a journey in the way that you so wonderfully describe. It connects us with the individuals that are doing the work, and it connects us with the bigger story. So I know I thank you on behalf of everybody else for getting us in the mood, helping us to understand why this is so important. Okay, it's not just Florent. I have a fantastic panel. Marga, sorry, yes, Marga, I almost said you, Marta. Marga, Emmanuelle, and Gautier, please join us here because we're going to dig in a little bit deeper. And help yourselves to water should you need it. Let me do the introductions here because we have got a huge amount of expertise around this table. Emmanuelle Berenger is the forest lead for Rainforest Alliance, and a lot of your work, in a sense, it's not dissimilar to Florent's, right? Working with local communities in that part of the world, thinking about sustainability, putting communities at the heart of this work. Marga works here in Europe, in the Netherlands, in the UK, and in Ireland, and she runs More Trees Now. We have a saying in the UK, it does what it says on the tin. More Trees Now kind of does what it says on the tin. And Gautier Quéru, who is the managing director of Mirova. So many of our conversations at the moment are about how we unlock finance, unlock green financing to do the kind of work that you guys are doing. So, I want us to get on a plane, leave the Andes, and land in Schiphol, Amsterdam, and go to a small wooded area on the outskirts of Amsterdam. And Marga, I want you to take us back a few years. Tell us about the work that you are doing, planting trees in Europe.
Well, what we try to do is to combine the power of community with the power of the regenerative power of nature. So we rescue saplings that grow in places where they cannot mature, and we scoop them out with saplings and we give them away for free to accelerate tree planting and regreening the community around us. And that has a lot of benefits.
So just explain a bit more about that process. You find them, you give them away for free, and how do you then encourage those saplings to be planted in a way that they can then mature and in turn create more saplings?
Yeah, well, actually the first step was to find the saplings that grow in places where they cannot mature, because you're also helping the forest getting younger. You are restoring heaths that are not supposed to have trees in it, or peat bogs. And we found that actually by saying openly, we have these trees available, who wants to plant, we've created traffic jams of people who've wanted trees all over the country. So rather than try to overcomplicate things, we just opened up basically the call and says who wants to, because we're ready. There are millions of trees to be found in ecosystems that are not supposed to be there all over. We can restore those ecosystems and create new ones with the regenerative power of nature. And people showed up.
So it's a kind of a self-seeding movement.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, so from planting more trees to looking after the trees that we already have. Emmanuelle, your work.
Yes, indeed. So Marga speaks about the regenerative power of nature, and it's amazing. So the most important is really to give room to forests and to make sure that the actual forest can stay there, because they do best, right? They regenerate by themselves. So we really need to remove the pressure on forests as a first step. And that's what a lot of people are trying to do. And we, on our side, are trying to engage farmers to stop deforestation by ensuring that they get a livelihood from the production of coffee, cocoa, tea, bananas, and others, and don't encroach in the forest to expand the area, that the area they already have is enough for them to thrive. So you probably have seen the frog logo and some of those products, and there are many others, of course, also contributing to that work. But this is not enough, right? Because the farmers won't encroach in the forest. But the forest that is there, what value does it have? If it doesn't have any value, it will be gone for other reasons. There's always a good or a bad reason to cut the forest, right? So how do you give value to forest? Well, we know it has value, right? We heard about the wonderful cultural value, the spiritual value, the ecological value, of course. But there are people there are countries that need to also develop, provide livelihoods, make sure that the kids go to school, that there is a health system. So you cannot just say, don't touch the forest. It will not happen. It will just not happen.
Because there are always these immediate pressures to use the forest resources, to consume them.
The underlying cause is basically poverty and the need for growth. That is one of the reasons of forest being gone for many different reasons. So giving value to the standing forest is something that is very important. So on top of working with farmers on certification, we also accompany communities and indigenous people in getting economical value from the forest by building small enterprises, helping them, of course, to improve management of the forest if needed, restore it where needed, because at some point we also need to accelerate, right, the restoration, and then through this mechanism, make sure that they can improve their livelihoods while preserving the forest. And I have great examples. We have many great examples.
I was going to ask. I mean, bring this to light. How do you create monetary value out of something that previously was just a nice tree?
Exactly. So, for example, in Guatemala, the communities have been giving something like 20 years ago community forest concessions, and they harvest 1 tree per hectare. So this is very low key. I have been there on the fire watchtower. We help them to build these towers to monitor fires, and you see a sea of trees, you know, that the eye cannot stop. And this is managed forests. When you go in protected areas, it's degraded. There has been fires, there has been illegal logging. So how come these managed forests look better? They look better because they harvest those very precious trees that they transform locally into decking, chairs, tables, that then export to high-value market like the US, and they make enough livelihood to be able to send their kids to school, to grow, to thrive, while keeping the forest. So I've been to those villages. The forest is up to their houses. They have not cut the trees. They keep them.
But is this not just a modern version of historic good care? Communities through all of history have known, well, if we knock everything down, then it will be gone.
Yes, this is very true. And actually, around 50% of the forest is somehow managed by local communities or indigenous people in the world. Yeah. But only 15% actually somehow have rights, official rights to this forest. The rights have been taken away from them. So the first step is to give them back the rights and then support them into building these sustainable enterprises, give them potentially the tools about managing those forests if needed. So it's all about the enabling environment and making sure that their rights are recognized and that the markets are there for them.
The markets are there for them. How do we do that, Gautier? Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot has been going on over the past years with respect to financing, trees, nature, protection, restoration, and under the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, there are big objectives to restore this natural capital.
And to turn the tap on for green finance.
Exactly, and we are speaking about 700 to 900 billion euros a year to bridge the funding gap towards nature protection by 2030. So we need to bring more funding in, and that's what we have been trying to do at Mirova. Over the past 5 years, we have mobilized around 700 million euros around nature funds. And we have to do this with both efficiency to maximize the value for money or the impacts per euro invested, and with also strong integrity aligned with what is promoted by operators and standards like Rainforest Alliance. And the good news is that there is a very positive momentum. We started with a partnership with the UN, first to restore degraded land and by planting more trees. And the ability to raise funding came with the idea of blended finance. It was seen as risky activity. Growing trees in developing countries mostly was not seen as a great, I would say, investment opportunity per se. The impact are there, but the attractivity was not fully clear, and we could put together a blend of public and private money to test models and finance land restoration projects. So with the support of public investors like French Development Agency, the European Investment Bank on the one hand, and also committed private investors, including French insurance companies, I see some of them in the room, or other types of institutional investors. We could mobilize 200 million euros and finance land restoration project, doing agroforestry project, producing sustainable cocoa, coffee, tree nuts that would reduce pressure on nature and restore what has been degraded. And this has been working pretty well. And the good news is that now more and more players are coming in, corporates also, to contribute to their net zero nature positive also journey, and are mobilizing more and more funding. So the investments tech sector for nature is really maturing.
Some people would argue that there is always going to be an inherent conflict in using the global financial system to fix this problem, when fundamentally the problem is trying to make money out of it in the first place. How do we get around that? How do we get around that inherent conflict?
Yeah, so it's by working hard first. It's not easy. Clearly, I mean, we need, it's not about replacing or believing that private money will solve everything. It's just based on the acknowledgement that public money and philanthropy will not be enough to bridge the funding gap. And actually, there is a call for private sector mobilization under the Global Biodiversity Framework, and use impact finance, blended finance. Of course, we're not speaking of super aggressive hedge funds, or I mean, it's not. It was speaking about impact finance mostly, that can find ways of combining efficiency, integrity, commercial viability, and really solid impact on the ground. And I think Rainforest Alliance around the table here is often promoting the fact that we can use market forces to protect and restore nature also for the benefit of the people, and the idea is to find this right balance.
We'll come back to you in a second. Do you have faith that the system can drive this change?
I think we need all the actors around the table. Everybody has a role to play, from finance to local communities to NGOs to individuals. We all have our little power, and if we don't use it, we lose our chance to make a difference. So this is really great that companies like Mirova and others invest in those projects.
And Marga, in the time that you have been doing your work, what sense do you get from when you go out, you talk to people? I mean, there are lots of people here trying to get support and investment for the kind of work that you do. Do you sense that there is something in the air that people want to support your work?
Well, I definitely know that people are ready to get going. So the whole point of our project was how can we make tree planting as simple and accessible as possible. And that's really why we designed the method we did. I mean, I hear farmers, I hear agroforestry. We've transplanted over 2 million saplings so far, rescued them from places where they don't belong and given them away. They went to farmers, cities to combat heat stress, tiny house initiatives, a food forest, anything that you can name. So there are so many actors that are ready to work. And if you make it accessible and simple, there's a lot of things we can do.
And when you see from Florent that his team, I wrote down one stat from his presentation that blew me away. They managed to plant 100,000 trees in a day. I mean, to me, that sounds extraordinary. Maybe to you, but that's a big number, isn't it?
That's a huge number, definitely, yes. But I also think that people underestimate what they can do.
Right.
On any given day that we have some volunteers in the forest rescuing saplings, one person can rescue 100 saplings that can grow into mature trees at the next farm. And that's just one day, one person harvesting for a few hours. So you can see how many hands make light work, and we can accomplish quite a lot.
Another, I thought, really interesting point that Florent made was around activating ancestral practices and principles. How and we often, we love to look at pictures of First Nations Americans in the glorious dress, and we kind of think about ancient practices. But when you're talking about a woodland on the outskirts of Amsterdam, do you get a sense that people are yearning to reconnect with a more earthy sense of nature? Does it unlock something in the way that we see it being unlocked when we look in other parts of the world?
Definitely. I think people yearn to be part of nature because a lot of people in Western or Northwestern countries have forgotten that they are part of nature.
We are.
And a lot of indigenous communities haven't. So there's a lot we can learn from it. And by engaging with your environment and understanding and learning about the regenerative power it has to also green your own immediate environment it can be also a spiritual and very educational thing to do.
So I want to take it from the kind of spiritual back to the policy and the kind of how do we drive the hard change? And one of the challenges we face is trying to unlock harmful subsidies and harmful practices. From your perspective, what are the blockages? What do we need to change?
Yeah, it's a big question. It may be above my pay grade.
Sorry, I keep sending you these big questions, don't I?
No, that's fine. I think it's about really having a narrative around what we can gain from this transition towards a low carbon, nature positive economy. And I think in the energy sector, I think this narrative has become clear of moving away from fossil fuel to renewable energy efficiency, and in the food system, in the exploitation of the living of nature, there is also the idea that we need to move to a regenerative economy that not only exploits nature but also invest in it and restore nature as it interact with it, and this narrative is coming up. And I think we speak of regenerative agriculture, regeneration in general, agroecology, agroforestry. This is becoming central in many conferences, and now it's about beyond this narrative, indeed creating the signals, either from policy signals, and in the European Union there has been great progress over the past years.
Yeah.
And with the restoration law, with deforestation-free products, that creates clear signals. CSRD is also a big regulation that is creating some challenges, but still encouraging. But beyond the stick, we need to have a carrot, and it's about also creating new activities, new businesses, more resilient supply chains, more resilient ecosystem. And I think for both consumers, providers, and all the ecosystem for companies, finance, it's really aspirational. So I think it's a mix of stick and carrot, and we're getting there progressively.
And you're probably about to tell me once again that this is above your pay grade, but I'm going to ask you anyway. And I'm sure Emmanuelle will have a view just in terms of the kind of global regulatory framework. In the UK, after, I'm going to say this horrible word, Brexit, but I've just said it. After Brexit, there was meant to be a big transition away from the common agricultural policy towards more nature-friendly subsidies or payments for farmers. When you look across the world, do you see really progressive examples of legislation and governance that is really driving the kind of work that these guys do? Who's doing the good governance work?
Yeah, it's hard to tell and give good grades to, but definitely, for instance, in Colombia, there are massive progress with the promotion of habitat banks and no net loss of biodiversity. That is very inspiring, and Colombia will host the next Biodiversity COP in October later this year.
Yeah.
In the UK, actually, there has been this biodiversity net gain legislation that is also creating a buzz. I mean, there is a bit of interest, and also in Asia. I mean, there are many countries that are also, with different approaches, angles, promoting the restoration and the protection of nature. Why? Because ultimately it's about clean air, clean water, also sustainable livelihood. So it's not only at the expense of the economy, or just it's not necessarily a trade-off. It can be aligned. So I think there are great initiatives all around the world.
Emmanuelle, what's your perspective?
Yes, I want to give two encouraging examples. One which is a very long-term one in Costa Rica. I think it's the example that all the ecologists mention. They have made that decision to not invest in an army, but invest in nature, and to really protect what they have and restore what they have lost. And they have developed governmental payment for ecosystem services that is really working well. I really encourage you to go to Costa Rica. It's amazing. It's the only place in the world where I've seen really like forests and animals going into the beach, and you walk among them. It's amazing.
I'm there. I can feel it.
Yeah,
no,
that's
we're in
really
rainy
great.
Paris,
This is a policy. Was a policy decision, a political decision, and it worked.
Yep.
And it still works, right? So this is really great. In not an easy context, right? Coming back to us, right? Yes. So because we also have to make efforts.
Sure.
There is recently the EU deforestation and degradation regulation made from the European Union. That is very encouraging. That has the potential to be a game changer. So the idea is that on the European market will be allowed only products that have proven not to come from deforestation or forest degradation. So of course deforestation, this is more about imports, but even forest degradation, this is within Europe, right? Because we are losing biodiversity at a speed and scale that is amazing. So if we can implement this well, we have the chance, to reverse that.
And what can individuals do then? What can we, as individual actors, do to accelerate this?
Look, I think the list is too long. I will just give one example. I mean, we've heard so many things about what we can all do, and all these beautiful startups and things is so inspiring.
Yeah.
I do really think that the market is a driving force on top of the political one, but we really need both. And the market, it's basically the people who consume, who purchase. Every day when we make a choice about what we buy, we can make a difference. It's very simple. So reducing the footprint of the product, make sure they don't come from pesticides use, deforestation, etc. Of course, there's the RA logo, the frog, but there are many other initiatives. So I think that this is something that really can make a difference as a small step. And then, of course, anything you can do to restore ecosystems, protect them, that's great.
Marga, what do you need to help you do more of what you do?
That's a good question. Well, we need a lot of hands. A lot of people are willing to roll up their sleeves and do the transplantation work.
So just time, getting involved.
effort, municipalities who are forward-looking, foresters who want to engage with the community around them, and funders who want to help us accelerate to even higher scale.
And Gautier, when we talk about Emmanuelle's point that consumers have a big role to play here, for you, it's about proving, if we talk about redefining the value in the supply chain, if there's a desire, if there's a need, if there's a market, that helps you you can go and get the money to make it happen.
Exactly, and I think altogether we need to build what we call a track record, showing that it works, that money can help unlock situations that have concrete impacts on the ground, and just scaling up. And like we've done so far, like with the energy transition, let's do it for the agroecological transition as well.
I would like you all to just have a final call out. What's your key message to ChangeNOW? Because I think we might have a little surprise after this session. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Emmanuelle.
Yes, I would say that forests are more than trees.
Yeah.
And forests are also people within forests. We need to reconnect with nature, both with our hearts, but also recognizing the tremendous value that they have for us at all levels, and bring them back into our system thinking, not as a decoration, but really within our lives, like the communities do that we work with. So let's try to reconnect with nature. That's my call.
There is something very special about trees and forests, isn't there?
There definitely is. Well, I'd like to invite people who feel the urgency to get going now to come talk to us. We are called More Trees Now. We are at ChangeNOW. The time really is now. So as long as we can get going, we can get a long way.
Final word for you.
Yeah, I think what is great about ChangeNOW is putting together in the same room and great place so many diverse, people with different backgrounds, civil society, public sector, private investor, corporates, startups, and I think it's really about building the coalitions of the willing to join forces to move to the tipping point. And so it's really about encouraging more of this coalition. We work with many players, including corporates, some in the room as well, and it's really these types of alliance that can prove that things can change now for the better.
We see what you did there.
And I think this is really the avenue for real and concrete results. It's about joining forces with those who are committed to, and I think there's a lot of good vibes and good energy here at ChangeNOW that can only encourage everyone to continue, and so let's do this together.
Take this energy and make it work. Gautier, Marga, Emmanuelle, thank you all very much indeed. Merci. After all the preparation. Merci beaucoup. Okay, so please stay in your seats because we have a really, really special interlude that we're about to dive into. Something that I've been looking forward to, even though I've only been told a little bit about it. But you're going to like it. Give us a minute. Merci beaucoup. That was Minuit 12, an amazing troupe of young dancers who use dance as a form of activism, as a form of climate activism. And I think you could see there the power of their work. It was so beautiful and so sumptuous. So, you know, often when we gather for events like this, there's a lot of talk, and talk is important, but it's really nice sometimes to just dig into some creativity and artistry. So thank you once again, Minuit 12. So our next guest, I'm really excited about meeting Luigi Cani. For those of you who don't know, he is a professional parachutist and wingsuiter. So you know those crazy dudes that wingsuit and kind of skim a hair's breadth away from the mountain? That's what Luigi does. He's a 12-time world champion in all different kinds of flying. And if you've seen some of his films, it's absolutely extraordinary, really, really breathtaking. And we're going to explain his connection to forests, to trees, to preservation, to conservation. But first off, I want to get him on stage. Luigi, where are you? Here we go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for making it.
Thanks for having me.
And you've just arrived from Brazil, right?
I arrived this morning from Rio de Janeiro, yeah.
So we'll make the questions easy so that you don't kind of fall asleep halfway through it, because it's been a long journey. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
You didn't parachute in to the...
No, I came by normal. I took a cab.
A cab. So before we get into it, tell me about some of the places where you have flown.
All right, I'll tell you.
You know.
First of all, I'd like to thank you guys for having me here.
And take
like helping the planet is not my everyday work.
Right.
Right. And I did this project that I'm going to show you guys because I have been to places in nature to do the filming, the flying.
Yeah.
Right. This is what I do in Brazil. I have been jumping for 25 years. I have done over 14,000 jumps, and all jumps are like experimental jumps. New places. In 2000, I was here landing the world's smallest parachute on top of Mont Blanc.
Right.
That was like 24 years ago.
Yeah.
So I have been fortunate to interact with nature in ways that I could lose my life.
Right.
So you have to understand and be respectful, and then the connection that you get, it's very strong. After these many years, going from young to mature,
young mature,
I start to understand the importance to give back this amazing opportunity. And actually, by using airplanes and helicopters, we don't help at all.
Right. And it's very hard to be a parachutist if you don't.
Exactly. You can base jumping. That you can be very friendly with the mountain, things like that. But mostly my jumps are from helicopters and airplanes. So, making the long story short, I came up with this idea. I'm from Brazil, so I went to the Amazon and I saw how beautiful it was, and I was like, wow, what if we drop some seeds, you know, from the sky? Would that work? And then I started to speak to people that they are knowledgeable about the subject, and professional people, and they said, yeah, it could work.
Yeah.
So I got into this project that I started to get permission from the Brazilian government to do this amazing drop, and I do everything for media in Brazil. We get a lot of television media and exposure in Brazil and through social media, and you know, all over the world as well.
Media environment there.
So I thought that would be a good message for people to get inspired, and during the process, what I would be learning, people that would be watching, which was like 50 million people in Brazil watched that show. It was prime time, only in Brazil.
Yeah.
All the people get a little bit of education like I did, things that I didn't know before. How could I help if I didn't know? So we got all the permits from the government. There was like 12. A lot of bureaucracy with the Brazilian Air Force, the FAA from Brazil, we need to customize the airplane to drop this box. Those boxes, they weigh 300 kilograms, and they would fall at speeds in between 220 and 300 kilometers per hour.
So you don't want it to land on someone's head?
No. The government gave us permission to do the drop in the middle of the Amazon. And I thought that was really cool at first. But then when I saw the location and we Google Map, I was like, wow, this is really in the middle of nowhere. How are we going to get access to that and bring the production people there and bring all the equipment, you know, and everything? It's going to be impossible. We tried really hard to do closer to the big city, Manaus, the capital. Couldn't do it. So I had to move 4 tons of equipment from Brazil, from Rio and São Paulo to Manaus, and then from Manaus by boat, 3 days on the boat to Little Rivers, to the area that was closer to where we have to go. And that area is still 80 miles away. So we have to fly from this little runway, dusty runway on the middle of nowhere for 45 minutes just to access the devastated area. How about I show a little bit of video? There's a 3-minute video.
I'd like to see it.
We can show.
You guys want to see it? You want to see the video? Yeah? I think they want to see it.
Okay, real quick.
Yeah.
The mission is, can you pause the video real quick? The mission is to make prime time on Brazilian TV.
Can we pause?
He has to have a challenge.
Because he wants to, Luigi just wants to
Can you freeze a little bit, the video?
Or if you go back to the top, when you can speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, in order for people to see, you have to make extraordinary. So, like a James Bond movie, a mission that you might not be able to accomplish. So, am I going to be able to release those seeds at the right altitude, at that speed, dive after the box, and pull the handle and release the seeds? That was like the drama about doing this. And a lot of people ask, why don't you just drop from the airplane? Yeah, we can do that as well. But it would work just the same. But a fraction of people would be able to see it if you don't build up the story. So what we're watching now, we are accessing the area, which is right there.
That's the devastated area.
That's the devastated area.
Okay.
Those are the seeds that...
So if we can play it again. Yeah.
Those are the boxes. We have stunt boxes that we use what we call stunt seeds. They're like some form of rice and vermiculite that they simulate the weight and the size of the seeds, and we keep dropping those boxes, and I'm following those boxes to understand the fall rate, the upper winds, the downwinds, where we need to open the box in relation to the devastated area.
Yeah.
Because if you open straight above, the winds will take to the other direction.
Yeah.
So we need to be 2.5 kilometers off.
So hang on, but you're having to intercept the box.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have to open it.
Go by itself. I have to dive, grab the box,
That's
and I have to open precisely at 6,000 feet.
Okay.
2.5 kilometers south of the area, so the upper winds will blow the seeds to where they need to go.
So I mean, but that is a crazy kind of feat of engineering, because you're dealing with the atmospheric conditions on the day,
yes,
and making sure that the seeds end up in the place that you want them.
The engineering for those boxes to fall at the right speed, and when you pull the handle, they would open and release the seeds, and then deploy automatic parachute, so the box would not just fall straight out.
Did you do a test run?
We did several test runs.
Okay.
We did several test runs in Rio de Janeiro before going there.
Yeah.
And I did 4 stunt box before the actual box. So when it came the time for me to jump with the box that actually had the seeds, that was like right after pandemic, so it was very hard to collect those seeds in a short time.
Yeah.
So those 100 million seeds, they're more precious than diamond for me at that time.
Yeah.
And then when I went to do the last box, the box ended up being heavier than the stunt box.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want it to leave any seed out.
Okay.
And that put a stress on me that I never cried before, ever.
Right.
You know, I jump with the smallest parachute. I have set a world record for the fastest free fall speed at 552 kilometers per hour, wearing 60 pounds of weight vest, you know.
What, to increase your acceleration?
Straight down to increase the risks. And I can go on and on, and on proximity flying with the wingsuit.
Yeah.
I was pioneer of this, start doing it, testing. So.
But this was the hardest thing.
It was emotionally the hardest thing for me, because when it came down to actually jump with the seeds, the risk of me not grabbing the box and releasing on the right altitude.
Yeah, yeah.
If it didn't do that, everything would be for nothing.
Yeah.
And then I was crying like a baby before, really crying. Like I was so, the level of stress because of the middle of nowhere, all the unexpected problems that we have to solve during the projects. You know? We are there for 15 days filming this in the Amazon, but pre-production took 1 year.
Yeah.
It was 1 year preparing, and then 15 days doing it to drop like 5 bucks.
And what, remind us, what year did you do this? When was it executed?
2002.
And have you been...
January 2002.
And have you been back to the site?
Well,
what did the scientists say? Has it had an impact?
Yeah, we have big sponsors on this. Like Audi is one of the sponsors. BTG, the Brazilian, one of the biggest investor banks in Brazil. So they are monitoring from satellites.
Yep.
And we did on the summer season when rains a lot. It's the raining season. We did everything by the book because we have to follow the rules from the government. The permits, everything, the location, we find to get a different location. When I got there, the forest engineer, the first thing, when we landed the helicopter there the first time, he said, you have to put people to monitor here because they're here.
Yeah.
You see that, he knew. I said, well, we don't have the budget for this. So the government sent us here to do this. The government work with us to select the seeds, the proper seeds, everything. They are part of this. I mean, they know much better than me, what you're doing. And said, well, you need to do the monitoring. So long story short again, after 1 year, not quite 1 year, 8 months maybe, it was getting greener, the area. And now 2 years later, it's 3 times worse. So someone asked me here, how big was the area? I would say, okay, I would say about 40, 50 football fields.
Yeah.
And now it's 3 times more. So people say, you fail, right? Yes, I did, but I didn't quit yet. I learned. Yeah, I use resource to learn.
Yeah.
I use resource to get a lot of people in Brazil to be at similar level of understanding that I am right now about this subject.
Yeah.
And we're going to do it again.
Right.
And everything we learn from this.
So what will you do? What will you do differently? Is it really about securing the area so that it is?
Yes. What we are going to do? Well, a lot of people ask, why don't you just throw out of the, those flying seeds, those winged seeds that they call, that if they touch the dirt, and they, if you have sun and rain and dirt, they're the kind of seeds that they will generate a tree. So for the next, we will work with private land.
Yeah.
This is the government.
Yeah.
So the people that are taking the wood there, they are using for cow farm there, they're making way more money that we have to take care of the location. Government is not doing a great job.
Yeah. And this connects with the point that so many speakers have made when we talk about conservation or preservation or investment in the environment. It has to make sense for local communities, and if there is no reason for them to look after, value, invest in our precious earth, then the pressures of everyday life mean that oftentimes the environment continues to be eroded.
Yeah. Well, me and the people that work on this project with me, it was about 40 people. We know what we went through.
Yeah.
Because out there was like a mission to coordinate everything and take everything there and make everything work on the middle of nowhere. So now we are working in a different area.
Where also in Manaus?
Not in Manaus. Okay. Mato Grosso. It's a private area.
Yep.
So we're going to prepare the land before we do it.
Yeah.
And we're going to do it in 3 ways. We're going to plant the trees. So plant
the same method?
No, different method. Just normal method.
Okay.
We go there, right? We don't know how many, but let's say a number here. We're going to plant 10,000 trees.
Yeah.
Planting. And then we're going to do the seeding from a military airplane with the ramp, low altitude.
Yeah.
We do that too. And then we do the James Bond style with the bigger box, falling faster, releasing,
Gonna make another film.
All in the same area.
Okay.
And then we will have the proper taking care, people taking care of the area because it's private and you're doing in a partnership. So it's not like the first stage of the project. It's the first stage and then the follow-up stage. Because in the middle of the Amazon, we don't have a resource to be there controlling,
So listen, the time has flown. And I can see the clock, 35
right there,
seconds. I have one last question for you.
Okay.
What did this teach you?
then I need to do more. And I hope that people that see those projects on media,
Yeah.
they understand that they need to do more too.
We all need to do more, right?
Yes.
Luigi, Cani, thank you
you.
so very much indeed
Thank
for
you.
sharing your story. Wonderful.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you.
Cheers, bro.
Cheers.
Okay. Trees, the power of trees, what they mean to us. Not just trees, but forests and all these environments that mean so much to us. I've really enjoyed the discussions that we've had about the work that the panelists are doing, and also there's the much deeper challenge of governance and finance, and how we can build more spaces, more precious spaces that we all need, that we've all come here to talk about. So thank you very much indeed for joining us for The Power of Trees. I'm Keme Nzerem. Hopefully I will see you tomorrow at the other panels I'm doing, and continue to enjoy Change Now. Thanks a lot.